now.
Great. Thank you all very much for joining us tonight for a Facebook Live Town Hall meeting. It's exciting and an honor to be with you, my constituents, tonight, and I look forward to taking all the questions you have. To kick things off, I just want to explain some of the fundamentals so everybody gets to ask the question they want tonight. If you have a question, please just type it into the comments section. We will likely be unable to get to everyone's questions, but we will certainly do our best. And we will take every question in order as they come up, controversial or not. It's always an honor and a privilege to serve everyone in the 7th District. Please know that this is by no means a substitute for an in-person town hall. As you know, in the first 100 days, we're up here 5 days a week. That is new. And so I just want to do the best I can to stay in touch with my constituents in every way I can, whether through phone, through Facebook, through email, and keep sharing with us. We've had over 1,000 phone calls since last Monday into this office, some from out of state, some from in-state. Town hall events in the future, we are looking for the first week after we get through this blur of activity in the 100-day plan, but we're tentatively trying to set up a live town hall for February 21, so please mark your calendars for that. Some folks are saying they're unhappy with the representation, that I have not been available, but they may not be informed on the basic facts. I've done over 31 town hall events across all 11 counties. Actually, I've been written up in the national media several times for being one of the most accessible congressmen ever. And so for the first 2 years, I met with constituents in every county, 10 to 11 counties, once a month. And I kept my word, and that town hall number I just gave you is just the official town halls that were in person at government centers open to everybody. In addition to those, I've done hundreds of meetings across the district with business groups, with sports groups, church groups, women's groups, religious leaders, across the board. And so I take pride in that. I ran on that. I held true to my word. Meeting with constituents in every county, every month. I don't know of any other congressman that has made that commitment to stay in touch with their constituents, and I aim to do that in the future as well. And so we'll be having plenty of live in-person town halls, and I look forward to taking any questions you have. I was a teacher for 20 years. I love the competition of ideas, and I will always do my best to be honest and share with you. I also add, I try to keep everything positive. I'm one of the few politicians I know also that's never run a negative ad, right? So I've been 2.5 years or so, and prior to that running, and never a negative ad. I don't believe I've ever said anything negative about a constituent. I try never to do that. I went to seminary. I try to take my faith seriously. I will be positive with everyone tonight, and I ask the same kindness in response. And so there's been a little confusion over some recent comments, but we'll get into that in the questions. And so let's start off right now with some of the policy, and that's where I'd like to dig in. And so please share your questions with us on policy, and we'll be glad to dig in. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and be reading off the questions as we get them. We might not be able to get to everyone, and we apologize for that. But just to start things off with some questions that we've gotten already from constituents. One of the questions we've gotten is regarding the Trump administration's nominees. And the question is whether or not you're going to be voting on them. And then the other question was whether or not, are you going to be supporting them no matter how qualified they are, unqualified they are, as well as, I think, some specific concerns regarding the nominee for education with Betsy DeVos.
Right. Okay, good. So thank you very much for the questions. We're trying to take them in real time as they come in. And so first of all, I don't get to vote on the secretary level nominations. That's the work of the Senate. They will be doing that. I'm supportive of most of the president's nominees. However, I think he's put together an incredible cabinet of high-level people that have experienced the world over. Some questions I think came in specifically on Secretary DeVos. I think she went through the committee today, and there'll be a vote on the Senate floor coming up shortly on that one. She's a champion of school choice and has worked tirelessly as a philanthropist in Western Michigan. And on the school choice issue, this is a charged time, right? The tensions are running high and the politics are running high. The choice issue does not mean that every school in the country is going to move toward choice, right? In some places it doesn't work. Rural areas, there are issues. My own kids go to fantastic public schools. Deep Run High School and Short Pump Middle, Henrico, Chesterfield, all the counties I have do a wonderful job at public education. But I have worked for years with Senator Stosh back in the state Senate on trying to provide kids with options, kids who have disabilities. I worked 3 years trying to help those kids have more of a choice when the current system isn't working out. And so I think all of us know also across many of the inner cities and the urban areas, education just is not performing well. Some of these kids do need a choice. And so when it comes to Secretary DeVos, I think she has that in mind. There's not a one-size-fits-all. That's what we don't want. I studied economics and did a PhD in economics and taught economics and ethics for 18 years at Randolph-Macon College. And in economic theory, a monopoly provides the worst outcomes, both in quantity and quality. Any successful economy does not work on the basis of monopoly. The most successful economies and the most successful politics work on the basis of competition and free ideas. And so that's the direction we want to move in terms of business. We want to lighten the load of government regulation. In terms of education, the same thing. We do not want the federal government controlling the life of your child. Right? The parent is ultimately responsible for the child. And so we want to return the money, the power, all the mandates. And I meet with education leaders, and they are in favor of this at every level. Right? They do not want the federal government adding more mandates, especially unfunded, to the state and to the local level. And so I believe our local levels teachers do a fantastic job. A lot of these issues are not teacher related, right? Most of them are not. The teachers are phenomenal. I was a teacher for 18 years. The teachers do a fantastic job. We have huge social problems. We have poverty problems that limit kids' ability to excel. And so we just want to provide creative ideas and do the best for all kids that we can do, and that's the plan going forward.
Wonderful. All right, Olivia had a question about health savings accounts and how exactly those were going to work under your proposal.
Okay, good. Olivia, thank you very much for the question. Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, is up for debate right now, and the Republicans are moving forward with a repeal and replace. And the primary issue, I think I've received more attention on this issue in emails and phone calls than probably any other. And the debate has to do with what plan are we going to provide, right? So the CBO, I have very intelligent constituents out there reading CBO reports of 18 million potentially uncovered people, costs going up in the future instead of down. And of course, that only happens if we don't have a solution. So we have 9 plans. I'm on the budget committee, and our chairman, Tom Price from Georgia, has one of those plans. There are several others. He's going to move on to be Secretary of HHS if confirmed by the Senate. And so we're waiting, right? And so unfortunately, politics is part of this process, right? The Democrats are now currently blocking most all the secretary position slots. So constituents want to know, what are we going to do? And I don't know the answer to that because we need the secretary to be in place. And so the president has made it clear once if Tom Price is confirmed, we will be able to relay much more information to you on what our plan actually looks like. No one is going to be left behind, right? I want to make that very clear. I've been out on paper saying my preferred outcome is to provide catastrophic insurance, kind of the old school model. Right now, Kaiser says the average family plan is $17,000 per family for a family of 4. The average family income in Virginia in my area is about $65,000. So that cost is not sustainable. And costs in Virginia are going up 20 to 25% per year. And that's not sustainable. And so we need solutions that really work. And of course, healthcare is the major cost driver for Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, veterans programs, etc. And so the ethical issue that's always left out in this conversation is that Medicare and Social Security are going insolvent in about 15 years. If that's true, your kids won't get any program. They will not have Medicare or Social Security when they retire in 50 years. And no one talks about that. So the ACA, Obamacare, etc., is not working. It's broken. The cost curve is ramping up at 25%. It's unsustainable. And so I have folks calling in and emailing in and being critical, but I haven't heard alternative plans being offered. So we're going to have to do the heavy lifting. On the other side of the aisle, there is no solution. And you can go Google all this to make sure that I got my facts straight, but go out to CBO, Congressional Budget Office, and you'll find that in 10 years, this is the main graph at CBO, in 10 years, all federal revenues will go only to the mandatory spending programs. Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, the Bush prescription drug plan. All revenues. That means in 10 years there will be no money left for national defense, education, transportation, etc., all of running government. And another way of checking the same fact is the flip side of that is the deficit in 10 years will be $1.2 trillion. $1.2 trillion we're adding in debt in every single year. And so the debt now is $20 trillion on our kids. It's going to be $30 trillion. And then we have $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities. Those are promises to pay to our kids that we don't have. $100 trillion. And it's all at CBO. So I've been a tireless advocate on all of this. I've held town halls, and I've been out in the press every single day on these issues, trying to make the American people aware of this. And over the past couple of years, I've had open town halls open to everybody. Mainly Republicans are showing up, but not many Democrats. Now the floodgates are open, and so it's a new day, and I welcome taking questions from everybody. So folks that feel unrepresented, I've been there for 2 years with wide open town halls that's well documented by everybody. And I welcome everybody at future town halls, and we look forward to doing plenty of them. And I'll take any questions live, etc. And I ask that they be rational. And I'll ask for your potential solutions because I want to hear them. If you have better solutions, that's where we want to go. So that's the basics on health care. And I think I started my own ideas on paper, right? I want a catastrophic insurance for everybody. I want an HSA with everybody, and everybody emails in and says, well, HSAs aren't funded. Mine is. I want to put a couple thousand to a few $1,000s in everybody across the country to pay for routine healthcare expenses. And then pre-existing conditions, half the states already had high-risk pools developed. And so we want to ensure we have pre-existing conditions covered. That's our goal. I think that's the goal of leadership and most everyone in the Republican Party. So I anticipate a plan that does something along those lines. And if we don't get it right, we're in trouble. Right now, the current system, families can't utilize their health care. They may have a gold-plated package, but there's a $5,000 deductible. Most families only have $500 in savings right now per year, according to most economic studies. They don't have $5,000 to pay the deductible. So you can have a premium product, but you can't use it. And that's the challenge. We have to fix the broken system, and we intend to do our best. So thank you for the question.
Great, wonderful. One other question we had, this one actually came in through a comment on our Facebook page before this town hall, and I saw a couple other people reference this issue. It appears that our president is choosing to lead via executive order as opposed to working with Congress to pass legislation. Do you approve of this approach, and will you and other members of Congress, what will you do to ensure the proper checks and balances are on the executive branch?
Right, and who asked? Did we have a name on that?
I know Bob asked about whether or not you would say no to the president. I think a couple people asked.
Good, all right, Bob, great question. That goes to the heart of what's going wrong in the country in general. Article 1 of the Constitution says Congress shall make all laws. And so since I've been there, that's not the case. Senator Mike Lee from Utah has a picture out on his Facebook, and a couple years ago, Congress, a typical year, did about 5 or 6 inches of law. The executive branch, the president, Article 2, did 11 feet of law. And so that's what's going on up here, right? Those in Congress are kind of ducking their responsibility. We would rather pass a nice law that sounds good and then have the executive do all the heavy lifting and actually write the law and the regulations, etc. But they're not elected. And we're putting those regulations on business, and that's why we haven't grown at 3% in the last 8 years. right? And our growth trajectory is not looking good unless we change things. So we're going to try to ramp down the regulation and get the economy moving. That's goal number one. Getting people jobs is just issue number one. And so to get to your question on the executive orders, President Obama, when I came in 2 years ago, did an unconstitutional executive amnesty. Very controversial issue, and President Obama, in his own words, said it was unconstitutional 20 times on TV. And so we can check that up. My goal isn't to get into a political back and forth. That's just the fact. I voted no, and my own team sometimes I differed with because I tried to stick to the constitutional argument, and I will in the future as well. Congress shall make all laws. And so President Obama said, well, I don't like what Congress is doing. They're not moving fast enough on these amnesty issues. I don't like it. And so I'm going to do it on my own with a pen and a phone. And that's the famous phrase. And he did it. And so right now, the new president is going to get rid of some of those executive decisions. But we would, of course, prefer to work with Congress and pass laws so they're permanent and they go through the House and the Senate and the president overcome vetoes. And that, of course, is the position we would prefer in the House. So thank you, Bob, for the question. And do we have any questions on the most recent executive decision coming in?
Yeah, we did have a couple of folks that asked about whether or not you support the immigrant ban on Muslims.
Right.
What exactly is going on that?
Right. Good. So, while we're on the topic of executive orders, that was the controversial issue over the weekend. And so the president did an executive order that is vetting. It's not a ban. It's not a religious ban. It's not a Muslim ban. That would be challenged in the court severely. And so the president put in place identical language to language President Obama used with respect to Iraq several years ago, and chose 7 countries that sponsor and fund and train and export terror, according to Obama's intelligence agencies, right? So 7 countries were picked by the Obama administration. Trump chose those 7 countries, and the purpose is to vet everyone coming into the country, putting a temporary 3-month policy in place that will vet everybody coming from these countries that have known terrorist funding, exportation, and support. And so in addition to that, the stats from the weekend have come in, and so the tension is high, and everybody knows there was a big contested election. But over 300,000 folks came into the United States last weekend. 109 people out of 300,000, 109 people were stopped for questioning. The best stats I have so far is 88 of those 109 passed through, and so we're a little over a dozen folks who have been stopped for questioning. No one's being deported. It's not a deportation bill. It's not a ban. It's not a Muslim ban. In fact, most people know I went to Princeton Seminary before I did my PhD in economics. James Madison, the author of the Constitution, along with Thomas Jefferson, close to our district, Madison's in our district, were most proud at the end of their life of their statutes on religious toleration. I believe 100% in that tradition, right? The Judeo-Christian tradition does not believe in coercing free will. We believe in freedom of the will, and we believe in freedom in politics, and so we believe in religious toleration embedded in the First Amendment, which is important. We're fighting a war against an opponent who does not believe in religious toleration. And so that is the issue. And it's the fundamental policy discussion has to do with migration. And so I'm amazed that the press hasn't gone back and taken a good look at the cause of the migration problem. The fundamental problem comes from Syria. How did we get a migration problem in Syria? And unfortunately, the executive branch and the administration had a failed foreign policy. President Obama promised to draw a red line in Syria. And if that line was crossed, we would get serious and take bold actions. We didn't do that. And so now we have verging on a genocide in Syria and a total migration collapse going into France and Germany, etc. Germany is being crushed their entire country is just in chaos over the issue. And so our goal is always to be generous. We take in over 1 million legal immigrants every year. We are a country of migrants. I'm proud of that. We all are. That's who we are. We believe in religious toleration. We believe in bending over backwards to make sure every single person in this country, their individual rights are protected. But at the same time as we protect our rights, we have to protect our rights. We have to make sure we are safe. And so we're checking on these 7 countries. We're just asking questions. Before folks come in, we have to say, are you friendly to this country that you're coming to? If the answer is yes, you're welcome. Some are hyperventilating on this issue, saying we're denying soldiers that have fought on our behalf in Iraq. After a couple simple questions, when we see their patriotic allegiance to this country, I have no doubt our intelligence folks will get that right in about 2 minutes, and we'll welcome those folks in with open arms.
All right, wonderful. We had just kind of to jump back over to the healthcare issue and Obamacare repeal. I know that there was a couple different folks, I think Tara and Robert, and I saw a couple other ask questions about things like cancer screenings not being covered by HSAs and concerns about pre-existing conditions.
Yep.
You know, how do we make sure that those people don't fall through the cracks?
Right. All good questions, completely legitimate, good concerns. I've talked with countless constituents on all those issues. One of our solutions is portability, right? So if you have portability of insurance products across employers and states and et cetera, once you get insurance and keep that insurance product, you don't have to worry about losing that, and you don't have to worry about pre-existing conditions anymore. So there's some simple free market positions we believe in. Portability, shopping across state lines, increasing the size of pools. Rand Paul has talked about making sure everyone can join a large pool to drive down costs. We've seen estimates of 20 to 30% cost reductions if we can just expand the size of pools so that insurance can be done in a more efficient way. And so those are just some of the solutions. People are rightly concerned. We want to get it right. We're listening to you, and thank you for the question.
Wonderful. And then we had a couple of folks that were asking about some of the Senate Democrats holding up the nominations, especially in light of Supreme Court nomination announcement that's expected at 8 p.m. tonight.
Right.
Kind of what's your thoughts and input on that?
Yeah, well, the Supreme Court, again, has been highly politicized. Unfortunately, the role of the court is to interpret the law, as I said earlier, and so I hope we can all agree on that, right? The job of the court is to best interpret the law that's written, and Article 1 of the Constitution is to ensure that Congress makes all law. And unfortunately, over the past decades, the Congress has been punting and hiding under the desk on several of the toughest issues. So we have a Supreme Court nominee up. The Senate is, according to some reports, threatening to not let any of the nominees through. I think Schumer's out in the news a little bit on that. And so they're pointing to Garland at the end of last year, and he didn't get a vote. But the historical record, from what I've read on this, is it is the historic precedent in most every case I've heard of, that in the last year of a presidency, the Supreme Court nominations aren't filled. And so it waits till the new president. I've read today 3 or 4 just in recent history where that was the case, and so that's what happened last time. And so we'll open a new presidency, and we'll go before the Senate, and we'll see what the will of the Senate is on that issue.
All right. We also had, I believe Catherine just asked in a follow-up to previous question, just to get a better idea of, I think there's some concerns about green card individuals like soldiers getting held up that have served our country in this process, as well as, you know, what do you think, do you believe in the green card process and visas process that we currently have? Yeah,
and who's that from?
That was from Catherine.
Catherine, thank you very much for the question. That we did not get everything right in the implementation of the executive order over last weekend. The green card piece was fumbled a little bit, and over the course of one day, Reince Priebus, the new chief of staff to the president, clarified that. And so the green card piece is no longer part of that policy over the weekend having to do with the migration issue. So I think we've clarified that, and so that's some good news.
Wonderful. We also had a question, actually I think Ann asked this, then I think I saw another individual ask about if you have any thoughts on Steve Bannon's role in the National Security Council and just kind of Trump's security policy in general.
I'm an economist, and I would love to get on the Foreign Policy Committee coming up so I can get deeper in the weeds on that. But the executive decisions are up to Article 2 in the Constitution, and so that's the president's prerogative. I don't know the details on all the folks who are up for those positions, and so I'm going to leave that up to the president, and constituents feel free to weigh in at that level, but that's not one of my decisions.
Alrighty, let's see what else we've got here. Some more questions about. I think we also have one of the questions, and I don't know if you went over this earlier on in our conversation about, making sure that there is some concerns about there's a firm replacement plan for Obamacare before we repeal it.
Right.
Kind of just a strategy-wise, and
Right.
what's the plan on that front that you're hearing and what you're hearing here on the Hill.
Right. That's huge issue. So repeal and replace, and that decision is going to probably wait until we have our secretary in place. And so someone in our Republican conference wanted to go ahead with a repeal without a replace being specified. I would much prefer to have a repeal and a replace done simultaneously, if at all possible. And of course, that's a very complex undertaking. But we've been studying this for 6 years or so. Paul Ryan is an expert on all of these issues, and so they've been preparing. Price has a plan. And so our goal, just so folks know the timing issue, right? In April, folks are going to go out to the insurance companies, rewrite policies for another year. So people as of April will be locked in for another year. So we probably have a 1.5 year delay minimum built into the policy cake. And so then there's a debate within the conference, should we be 2 years, right? That'd put us out at about a 2-year window for the repeal and replace, or 3 years or 4 years after the next presidential. And so most of us want to make the choice earlier, right? So constituents get to see what is the policy, what are you moving forward on. I think we're going to be proud of our position to make healthcare better. The primary goal is to bend the cost curve down, right? That President Obama promised that you could keep your doctor, you could keep your insurance policy, and that he would bend the cost curve down. On average, the cost curve is going up by 25% per year, right? And so compound interest, right? If you're making 4% over time, that can blow up after a lot of years, right? The cost curve, it goes like that, the growth curve. So if costs are going up by 25%, you can imagine what will happen to Americans' costs for healthcare going up in a 10, 20, 30-year window. It'll be astronomical growth in the prices you pay at home for healthcare. So I think we're going to be very proud of the product we come up. We're going to bend the cost curve down. I spoke to Paul Ryan, our leader, last week before we went to Philadelphia, and he assured me of that. The cost curve will be bent down. That's the most fundamental issue that we have to get right. And then the deductibles and the pre-existing conditions. And I think the American people are going to be happy when they see what we put together.
All right. And I did not get the name of this person, but they were asking about Trump's plan to build a wall, and kind of as a fiscal conservative,
right.
What's your response to ensuring that, how are we going to pay for that?
Right. So one of the president's promises was to build a wall due to the immigration problem. We have a massive drug problem in our country. It's not theoretical across all of my counties. If you go and talk to my sheriff, say what's the #1 issue in your county, you're going to hear about the opioid crisis. And it's huge, it's significant. It's taking the lives of our young people. So safety, immigration, drugs, etc. I got a chance to meet with the ambassador from Colombia a few weeks ago in my office. We talked about the issues, about the trying to use the moral bully pulpit, the Pope weighing in on the drug issue. weighing in on every single side of the issue we can weigh in to solve this scourge on the kids. So building a wall, we'll see exactly what form that takes, right? Sometimes you have a river, sometimes you have a mountain, sometimes you have whatever. But the basic principle is we just want to stop the illegal immigration into the country, right? Legal immigration, I think it's been 3 million legal immigrants in the last 2 years. So America has been always welcoming, opening armed country to the rest of the world. We want to build a wall or whatever proxy we can put in place to stop the crossing the border illegally. Just a few numbers to show you why that matters. The welfare costs, according to Robert Rector at Heritage Foundation, are about $37,000 every individual is eligible to in federal welfare spending. If you have 2 kids in school at the state and local level, that's an additional $26,000. And so the question is, who's paying the $37,000 and the $26,000, right? And so the answer is the American taxpayer. And so that's part of the issue. And then as illegal immigrants come across the border by the millions as well, the wage rate goes down for American workers, right? And so we want to balance being a generous nation and helping the rest of the world, especially migrants who are fleeing persecution. But at the same time, we cannot continue to pass the costs on to the average worker who has not seen a wage increase in 30 years. We had a historic election this time. 80% of Republican voters were outsiders. Rand Paul, Cruz, Trump, Carly, etc. On the Democratic side, you had a 50-50 split with Bernie Sanders coming very close on an outsider message. And the average person, right, the forgotten man, that was a symbol for this election this year. And so there are differences across the party lines. Believe it or not, up here in D.C., we all get along. We work out in the weight room together. The Democrats and Republicans are all friends. We share faith together. We share common goals together for our kids, etc. And so on the border issue and immigration is one of those tough ones that people disagree on. And so elections decide those. And so we'll go forward on this. We've had a wall in legislation since Ronald Reagan, but we've never implemented it and got it right. And so over the past decades, if we would have worked on that issue and just had rational procedures in place, then perhaps it wouldn't be so much tension these days. And so that's a rough answer to a huge, huge issue.
Great. I think this will be probably our last question.
Right.
I think we've covered a lot of different topics tonight. And we'll allow a little bit of wrap-up comments from the congressman,
sure,
as well as a reminder regarding our tentatively scheduled upcoming live in-person town hall. We had 2, I'm going to just do kind of 2 quick questions here. We have one regarding, Adam was wondering whether or not the personhood legislation will ban birth control. And then Jen and Sandy were asking whether or not you support defunding Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, so I mean, I give a kind of I'm pro-life across the board. I come from a medical family. And so the first question was from who? Was on will the life bill?
And then Jen and Sandy.
And it was the first question, will the life bill do what?
Will it ban birth control?
Ban birth control. The life issue, no, just decides on the definition of life. And so for the science folks, when it comes to the environment, or et cetera, I'm an economist, I follow the data, right? So whatever the data say and the best science says, I will follow it. And so on the life issue, the same thing holds. According to the best science, the DNA says that at conception you have a human life. It's no other form of life. And so then the burden falls, if you have a human life, how do you protect that life, at what stage? And so I'm on the pro-life side of that issue. That bill will not affect other related. It just determines when life is formed and following the best science, and it doesn't have any other implications. And then there was a second question.
Do you support defunding Planned Parenthood? That was Jen and I think Sandy.
Yeah, we're all in favor of giving women the best health care possible. And so no one's in favor of getting rid of health care and the clinics, etc. However, the taxpayer funding of abortions, when you have a pro-life position, is the problematic part. So that part we're going to have to work out how you get rid of that. We passed a bill this week in the House to help solve that. But that's a tough issue that divides a lot of people almost evenly. across the country, but I think we can disagree and still hold out respect for each other as we debate these issues.
Wonderful. And I guess the last question, just I know we didn't get to everyone's question. We want to be conscious of time and just is there other ways that constituents can get a hold of you, and how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, email us at brat.house.gov. As I said, the phone calls have been flooding in, and so it is a unique time in politics. Some people feel that they haven't been represented. We're getting emails like that. That's troubling for me, because I try to be the most transparent, open politician in Congress. I've had over 30 open town halls. I will have plenty coming forward. You can go check the majority leader's calendar, and as soon as I get a break and I'm home, the last weekend I was home, I went through 8 counties in 2 days. You can go check the Facebook and etc. To see I met with everybody across all sorts of groups, business groups, religious groups, etc. And so I continue to pledge to folks I will be the most accessible congressman you can find. The folks that are saying I'm not accessible, I have 850,000 constituents. And so I will do my best to meet everybody, but it is very hard. So when the phone lines clog up on the weekend, our phone lines only hold so many calls. And so I'm trying to prioritize and reach constituents first. We're getting flooded with calls. Some of it's just politics, right? Some of it's just organized calls coming in from other states, flooding the lines, etc. My goal is to represent the 850,000 constituents I have. I will do that for everybody. I'm the congressman for everybody. And so I'll pledge to do what we did tonight. I tried to take the toughest questions that people had. We have plenty of friendly questions I could have answered that are softballs. You see, I didn't do any of that. I took the toughest questions on the toughest issues of the day and tried to explain rationally what my position is. We won't always agree on every issue, right? But I will always put out, and you can follow me up here on Facebook and my email letters, etc. I try to explain every controversial tough vote I take. I give the rationale for the vote. I give the economics for the vote. I give the budget for the vote. I give the first principles of the vote. And I'll always do that. And so the folks that say they're not clear about my position, sometimes, some of the folks, I think it's some politics going on. And I'll leave it at that. But I love everybody out there. I went to seminary. That's a command. That's not a suggestion. And so I'll look forward to meeting all of you and continuing this rational discourse that will bring us all together as a nation, and that is the goal. All right? Thank you all very much for joining me for this town hall meeting tonight. God bless.